Welcome to True Crime Case Audio, where we delve into the darkest corners of human nature. Today's episode unravels a tale of creepy mother-in-law's obsession turns to murder. In the quiet suburban town of Maplewood, New Jersey, where picket fences lined manicured lawns and neighbors greeted each other with warm smiles, a sinister tale of obsession and murder was about to unfold. The Whitman family seemed to embody the American dream, a successful young couple with a newborn baby, living in a beautiful, two-case colonial house. However, beneath the surface of this picture-perfect family lay a web of manipulation, jealousy, and ultimately, crime that would shake the community to its core. Helen Whitman, 28-year-old pediatric nurse, was known for her kind heart and gentle demeanor. Her husband, Mason Whitman, 30, worked as a software engineer for a prestigious tech company in New York City. The couple had recently welcomed their first child, a baby girl named Emma, who brought immense joy to their lives. They appeared to have it all: love, success, and a bright future ahead. Enter Evelyn Whitman, Mason's 58-year-old mother. A widow for the past 5 years, Evelyn had always been close to her only son. She lived just a few blocks away from the Yum family, a proximity that would prove to be both a blessing and a curse. The case of the Whitman family tragedy began innocently enough. When Helen and Mason announced their engagement 3 years ago, Evelyn seemed thrilled. She helped plan the wedding, offering her opinions on everything from the flower arrangements to the seating chart. At the time, Helen appreciated her future mother-in-law's enthusiasm, interpreting it as a warm welcome into the family. The wedding day was picture perfect, with Evelyn beaming proudly as she watched her son exchange vows with Helen. Guests later recalled how Evelyn's speech at the reception was filled with emotion, praising Helen as the daughter she never had. Little did anyone know that this sentiment would morph into something far more sinister in the years to come. The first signs of trouble appeared shortly after Helen and Mason returned from their honeymoon. Evelyn began dropping by their house unannounced, often staying for hours at a time. She would rearrange furniture, criticize Helen's cooking, and offer unsolicited advice on how the couple should manage their finances. Ellen, not wanting to create tension in her new family, initially brushed off these intrusions as Evelyn's way of showing love. Mason, caught between his wife and his mother, often found himself in the middle of their increasingly frequent disagreements. He loved both women and struggled to maintain peace in the family. His attempts to mediate only seemed to exacerbate the situation, with Evelyn accusing Helen of turning her son against her, and Helen feeling unsupported by her husband. The situation escalated when Helen became pregnant with Emma. What should have been a joyous time for the family became a battleground. Evelyn insisted on attending every doctor's appointment, offered constant advice on Helen's diet, exercise routine, and even went so far as to suggest names for the baby, all of which were variations of her own name. Helen confided in her best friend, Rachel, about the mounting tension with her mother-in-law. Rachel urged Helen to establish firm boundary, but Helen, ever the peacemaker, was reluctant to cause a rift in the family. This reluctance would prove to be a fatal mistake. Emma's birth should have been a moment of pure happiness for the Whitman family. Instead, it marked the beginning of a nightmare. Evelyn practically moved into the young couple's home, insisting that Helen needed her help with the baby. She criticized Helen's parenting skills, questioned her ability to breastfeed, and even suggested that Emma looked nothing like Helen. The constant presence of her mother-in-law began to take a toll on Helen's mental health. She developed postpartum depression, a condition that Evelyn dismissed as weakness. Mason, overwhelmed by his new role as a father and the increasing tension at home, buried himself in work, often staying late at the office to avoid the conflict. Neighbors began to notice the change in the once happy couple. Helen, once vibrant and sociable, became withdrawn. She was rarely seen without Evelyn by her side. Older woman's hand, always firmly on the handle of Emma's stroller. Mason's car was seldom in the driveway, his absence a glaring sign of the troubles within. As Emma grew from a newborn to a toddler, Evelyn's obsession with her granddaughter intensified. She insisted on being called Mama by Emma, a title that cut Helen to the core. Evelyn began to create scrapbooks and photo albums that prominently featured herself with Emma, often excluding Helen from family pictures. Helen's attempts to assert herself as Emma's mother were met with hostility from Evelyn. The older woman would undermine Helen's authority, contradicting her parenting decisions and lavishing Emma with gifts and treats against Helen's wishes. When Helen confronted Mason about his mother's behavior, he accused her of overreacting, suggesting that she should be grateful for Evelyn's help. The situation reached a boiling point on Emma's second birthday. Evelyn had taken it upon herself to plan the entire party, excluding Helen from all decisions. The party favors bore the label Emma and Mama Evelyn's Special Day, a detail that didn't go unnoticed by the guests. When Helen objected to Evelyn's attempt to take over the cake-cutting ceremony, a loud argument ensued, ending with Helen in tears, and Evelyn comforting a confused and frightened Emma. In the weeks following the birthday fiasco, Ellen began to assert herself more forcefully. She limited Evelyn's visits and insisted on making parenting decisions without her mother-in-law's input. Evelyn, feeling increasingly shut out, began to spin a web of lies. She told Mason that Helen was neglecting Emma. She had seen bruises on the child, and even suggested that Helen might be having an affair. Mason, torn between his loyalty to his wife and his mother, began to doubt Helen. The seed of suspicion planted by Evelyn grew, nurtured by her constant whispers and manipulations. Helen, unaware of the extent of Evelyn's deceit, couldn't understand why her husband had become so cold and distant. It was during this time that Evelyn's obsession took a dark turn. She began to believe that she was the only one who could truly care for Emma. In her distorted mind, Helen had become an obstacle to be removed. Evelyn started to research untraceable poisons, using the computer at the local library to avoid detection. She meticulously planned every detail, determined to eliminate Helen and claim both Emma and Mason as her own. On a crisp autumn morning, exactly 2 years and 3 months after Emma's birth, Ellen Whitman was found dead in her kitchen. The official cause of death was initially ruled as a tragic accident, apparent anaphylactic shock from a severe allergic reaction. Helen, who had a known allergy to peanuts, had seemingly ingested a smoothie contaminated with peanut oil. The community was shocked by the sudden loss of the young mother. Neighbors brought casseroles and offered condolences to the grieving family. Evelyn, playing the role of the devastated mother-in-law, moved into the Whitman home to help Mason cope with his loss and care for Emma. In the days following Helen's death, Mason was a shell of his former self, barely able to function. Evelyn took charge of the household, caring for Emma, and making all the funeral arrangements. She was a picture of strength and composure, earning the admiration of friends and neighbors who praised her resilience in the face of such a tragedy. Detective Lisa Martinez of the Maplewood Police Department was assigned to review Helen's death. What seemed like a straightforward accidental death soon began to raise questions in the experienced detective's mind. Martinez, known for her meticulous attention to detail, noticed several inconsistencies in the initial report. First, Helen had always been extremely careful about her allergy, checking ingredients religiously. The idea that she would carelessly consume something containing peanuts seemed out of character. Secondly, the kitchen showed signs of a struggle. Broken glass, a chair slightly out of place, details that didn't align with the theory of a sudden allergic reaction. Martinez began to dig deeper, interviewing family members, friends, and neighbors. Picture of the troubled family dynamic began to emerge. Helen's best friend, Rachel, shared her concerns about Evelyn's overbearing presence in the young family's life. Neighbors recounted the frequent arguments they had overheard and the visible tension between Helen and her mother-in-law. As the investigation progressed, Martinez uncovered a trail of evidence that pointed to a carefully premeditated murder. Security footage from the local library showed Evelyn researching poisonous substances and methods to induce anaphylaxis. A search of Evelyn's home revealed a hidden stash of peanut oil and a notebook filled with disturbingly detailed plans. The case against Evelyn Whitman began to build. Forensic evidence revealed traces of a concentrated peanut extract in the smoothie glass found in Helen's kitchen. This wasn't a case of accidental contamination, a deliberate and calculated act. Mason, confronted with the mounting evidence of his mother's guilt, fell into a deep depression. A realization that he had doubted his wife, that he had allowed his mother's manipulation to cloud his judgment, was almost too much to bear. He cooperated fully with the investigation, providing details of Evelyn's behavior in the months leading up to Helen's death. Emma, too young to understand the tragedy unfolding around her, was placed in the care of Helen's parents. The little girl, who had been the unwitting center of a deadly obsession, would grow up without the mother who had loved her so fiercely. The trial of Evelyn Whitman became a media sensation. The prosecution painted a picture of a woman driven by an unhealthy obsession, willing to commit murder to satisfy her desire to control her son and granddaughter. Evelyn's defense team attempted to portray her as a loving grandmother, whose actions, while misguided, were motivated by genuine concern for Emma's well-being. Witness after witness took the stand, recounting instances of Evelyn's manipulation and Helen's growing fear and isolation. Mason's testimony was particularly heart-wrenching, as he struggled to reconcile the mother he had always loved with the monster revealed by the investigation. The most damning evidence came in the form of Evelyn's own journals, discovered during the investigation. Page after page detailed her growing resentment of Helen, her belief that she was the only one fit to raise Emma, and finally her plans to remove the obstacle that stood between her and the family she believed should be hers. After a trial that lasted 3 weeks, the jury found Evelyn Whitman guilty of first-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the verdict was read, Evelyn showed no remorse, her face a mask of cold determination. Her final words before being led away were directed at Mason. "I did it for you and Emma. You'll understand someday." The aftermath of the trial left the community of Maplewood reeling. The picture-perfect facade of suburban life had been shattered, revealing the dark undercurrents that can run beneath the surface of even the most seemingly ideal families. Mason Whitman, grappling with the dual loss of his wife and the mother he thought he knew, entered intensive therapy. The road to healing would be long and difficult, but he was determined to be the father Emma needed, to honor Helen's memory by raising their daughter with all the love and care she would have given. Emma, now living with her maternal grandparents, would grow up knowing her mother through stories, photographs, and the enduring love of those Helen had left behind. As she grew older, she would come to understand the tragic circumstances of her mother's death and the grandmother whose obsession had torn her family apart. The Whitman family tragedy sent shockwaves through the community of Maplewood and beyond, sparked conversations about family dynamics, pressures of new parenthood, and the importance of recognizing and addressing unhealthy behaviors, or they escalate tragedy. Support groups formed for those dealing with overbearing in-laws or family members with controlling tendency. Mental health professionals reported an increase in couples and families seeking therapy to address underlying issues and improve communication. The case also highlighted the often overlooked issue of postpartum depression and the vital importance of support systems for new mothers. Helen's struggle with postpartum depression, dismissed and exacerbated by Evelyn's presence, became a rallying point, advocates pushing for better mental health resources for new parents. In the years following the trial, Mason Whitman became an advocate for domestic abuse awareness, particularly focusing on the less recognized forms of emotional and psychological manipulation. He spoke at conferences and to support groups, sharing his case as a cautionary tale about the dangers of ignoring red flags in family relationships. The Maplewood Police Department, led by Detective Martinez, implemented new training programs to help officers recognize signs of family tension and potential domestic abuse situations. The case became a teaching tool, demonstrating the importance of looking beyond the surface in investigations involving family death. As life in Maplewood gradually returned to a semblance of normalcy, the memory of Helen Whitman and the tragedy that befell her family lingered. The park where she used to take Emma for playdates was renamed in her honor, a place where families could gather and children could play, a testament to the joy and love Helen had brought to those around her. The Whitman house, once a symbol of suburban perfection, stood empty for years, a silent reminder of the events that had unfolded within its walls. Eventually, it was sold to a young couple starting their own family. As they moved in, neighbors welcomed them warmly, perhaps a bit more attentively than they might have in the past. The lessons of the Whitman tragedy not forgotten. Emma Whitman grew into a thoughtful and compassionate young woman, her mother's kindness living on through her. Though she had no memories of Helen, the stories shared by her father, grandparents, and her mother's friends painted a vivid picture of the woman who had loved her so fiercely in the short time they had together. On Emma's 18th birthday, Mason presented her with a box of mementos, photos, letters, and a journal Helen had kept during her pregnancy and the first months of Emma's life. Through these precious items, Emma was able to connect with the mother she had lost, finding comfort and inspiration in Helen's words, and a love that radiated from every page. As the years passed, the case of the Whitman family tragedy became a cautionary tale, a reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked obsession and the importance of healthy family boundaries. It served as a stark contrast to the idyllic image of suburban life, prompting many to look beneath the surface of their own family dynamics. Mason Whitman, though forever changed by the loss of Helen and the betrayal of his mother, found a way to move forward. He honored Helen's memory by being the best father he could be to Emma, and by using his experience to help others recognize and address toxic family situations before they escalated. The community of Maplewood, once shaken by the revelation that such darkness could exist in their midst, emerged stronger and more vigilant. Neighbors looked out for one another with renewed care. There was a heightened awareness of the importance of supporting new parents and families. Despite the conclusive evidence in Evelyn's conviction, some questions remained unanswered. What had driven Evelyn to such extremes? Had there been warning signs in her past that went unnoticed? Mental health experts speculated about possible undiagnosed personality disorders, or the impact of her own experiences as a mother and wife. These questions served as a reminder of the complexity of human nature and the often blurred line between love and obsession. They prompted discussions in psychology circles about the need for better understanding and early intervention in cases of unhealthy family attachments. The case of Helen, Mason, Emma, and Evelyn Whitman didn't end with the trial or even with Evelyn's incarceration. It continued to unfold in the lives of those left behind, in the conversations it sparked, and in the changes it inspired in families, communities, and institutions. Emma, as she grew older, grappled with her own identity. The daughter of a murdered mother, a grandmother serving life for that murder, she found strength in her father's resilience and in the enduring love of her mother's memory. Her journey of self-discovery and healing became a testament to the human spirit's capacity to find light even in the darkest of circumstances. Mason, while never fully recovering from the trauma of losing Helen and the betrayal by his mother, found purpose in raising Emma and in his advocacy work. He remarried years later to a woman who understood his past and supported his ongoing healing process. Together, they created a loving home for Emma, honoring Helen's memory while embracing the new chapter in their lives. The impact of the Whitman family tragedy extended far beyond Maplewood, touching lives across the country. As the case gained national attention, it sparked a broader conversation about family dynamics, mental health, and the dark side of seemingly perfect suburban life. Social workers and family therapists reported an increase in people seeking help for issues related to overbearing in-laws and family boundaries. Many cited the Whitman case as a wake-up call, prompting them to address simmering tensions before they could escalate to dangerous levels. Universities began incorporating the case study into their criminology and psychology curricula, using it to illustrate the complex interplay of family dynamics, mental health issues, and criminal behavior. Students analyzed the case, looking for red flags that might have been missed, and discussing intervention strategies that could prevent similar tragedy. While the world outside moved on, Evelyn Whitman faced the consequences of her actions within the confines of a maximum security prison. Initially unrepentant, she maintained that her actions were justified, a delusion that slowly crumbled as the reality of her situation set in. Prison psychologists worked with Evelyn, trying to unravel the twisted logic that had led her to commit such a heinous crime. Through these sessions, a picture emerged of a woman whose own upbringing had been marred by controlling parents and unfulfilled dreams. Evelyn had transferred her own thwarted ambitions onto Mason, seeing him as an extension of herself, rather than an individual with his own life and family. As the years passed, Evelyn's mental state deteriorated. The carefully constructed reality in which she was the hero of her own case began to crumble, leaving her to face the true horror of what she had done. She became a shell of her former self, haunted by the memory of Helen and the family she had destroyed. For Mason Whitman, the road to recovery was long and fraught with challenges. The dual betrayal by his mother and his own failure to protect Helen weighed heavily on him. He struggled with guilt, wondering if he could have prevented the tragedy if he had recognized the signs earlier. Therapy became a lifeline for Mason. Through countless sessions, he learned to process his grief, anger, and guilt. He came to understand the manipulation tactics his mother had employed and how to recognize similar patterns in the future. As part of his healing process, Mason became involved in support groups for survivors of family violence. Initially attending as a participant, he eventually began sharing his case with others. His experiences resonated with many, and he found purpose in helping others navigate the complex emotions that come with family betrayal and loss. As Emma Whitman grew from a child to a teenager and then a young adult, she grappled with the legacy of her family's tragedy. The absence of her mother was a constant ache, made more complex by the knowledge that her grandmother was responsible for that loss. Emma's journey of self-discovery was shaped by this unique and painful history. She excelled in school, finding solace in academic achievement and extracurricular activities. As she entered her teenage years, she began to ask more questions about her mother and the events that had torn her family apart. Mason, true to his promise to honor Helen's memory, was always open and honest with Emma, answering her questions as best he could. He shared stories of Helen's kindness, her love for Emma, and her strength in the face of Evelyn's increasing hostility. At 16, Emma made the difficult decision to visit Evelyn in prison. The meeting was emotionally charged, with Emma confronting the grandmother she barely remembered about the horrific crime that had shaped her life. Evelyn, by then a shadow of her former self, could offer no satisfactory explanation for her actions. The visit, while painful, provided Emma with a sense of closure and reinforced her determination to live a life that would honor her mother's memory. The Whitman case raised important questions about the media's role in reporting on family tragedies. Initial coverage had focused on the sensational aspects of the crime, with lurid headlines and speculation running rampant. However, as the full case emerged, more thoughtful journalists began to explore the deeper issues at play. Documentary filmmakers produced in-depth examinations of the case, interviewing experts in family psychology, law enforcement, and domestic abuse. These productions helped to shift the narrative from mere sensationalism to a more nuanced understanding of the complex factors that can lead to family tragedy. The case also sparked discussions about the responsibility of the media in reporting on mental health issues and family dynamic. Guidelines were developed to ensure more sensitive and accurate reporting on similar cases in the future. The Whitman case had far-reaching implications beyond the realm of media and public discourse. Lawmakers took notice of the case and the issues it highlighted. In New Jersey and several other states, legislation was introduced to strengthen protections for new parents and to provide additional resources for mental health support in the postpartum period. The Helen's Law, named in memory of Helen Whitman, was passed in New Jersey. This legislation mandated increased screening for postpartum depression and anxiety in new mothers and provided funding for support services. It also included provisions for education programs aimed at helping families recognize signs of unhealthy control and manipulation in family relationships. The town of Maplewood, once shaken to its core by the Whitman tragedy, emerged from the experience as a more aware and supportive community. Case had shattered the illusion of suburban perfection, but in its place grew a more authentic and connected neighborhood. Annual events were organized in Helen's memory, focusing on family health and community support. The local library established a resource center providing information on family dynamics, mental health, and domestic abuse prevention. These initiatives served as a lasting legacy, ensuring that the lessons learned from the Whitman tragedy would continue to benefit future generations. The Whitman case left an indelible mark, not only on the family and community, but also on the first responders and investigators involved. Detective Lisa Martinez, who had led the investigation, found herself profoundly affected by the case. Martinez became an advocate for better training for law enforcement in recognizing signs of family abuse and manipulation. She developed a program to help officers understand the subtle indicators of toxic family dynamics that might otherwise go unnoticed. Paramedics who had responded to the initial 911 call for Helen also struggled with the aftermath of the case. Knowing that they had been called to a murder scene disguised as a medical emergency weighed heavily on them. Support services were expanded for first responders, recognizing the emotional toll that such cases can take. The Whitman case highlighted the growing importance of digital evidence in criminal investigations. Evelyn's internet search history, uncovered during the investigation, had provided crucial evidence of premeditation. This aspect of the case became a focal point for discussions about privacy, digital forensics, and the role of technology in modern crime solving. Law enforcement agencies across the country began to invest more heavily in digital forensics training and equipment. The case was often cited as an example of how seemingly innocuous online activities could provide vital clues in criminal investigations. The trial of Evelyn Whitman set several important legal precedents. The use of digital evidence, including internet search histories and email communications, was rigorously debated in court. The case law established during this trial would go on to influence numerous future cases involving digital evidence. The prosecution's strategy of focusing on the psychological manipulation and emotional abuse leading up to the murder also set a new standard in how such cases were tried. It highlighted the importance of considering the broader context of family dynamics in cases of domestic violence and murder. Years after the trial, the Whitman case continued to capture public interest. Books were written, examining the case from various angles: true crime accounts, psychological studies, sociological analyses of suburban life and family dynamics. The case became a touchstone for discussions about the dark undercurrents that can exist beneath the surface of seemingly perfect families. It served as a cautionary tale, reminding people that appearances can be deceiving, and that it's essential to look out for one another in our community. As Emma Whitman entered adulthood, she chose to honor her mother's memory by pursuing a career in child psychology. Her unique perspective, shaped by her own experiences, made her a compassionate and insightful practitioner. She became an advocate for children caught in the middle of family conflict, working to ensure that their voices were heard and their well-being prioritized. Mason, while never fully recovering from the trauma of losing Helen, found a measure of peace in his advocacy work and in watching Emma grow into a strong, compassionate young woman. He often reflected on how Helen would have been proud of the person their daughter had become. The Whitman case, with all its tragedy and horror, ultimately led to positive changes in how society addresses family dynamics, mental health, and the well-being of new parents. Helen's life, though cut short, had a lasting impact, inspiring changes that would help protect other families from similar fates. As the years passed, the case of the Whitman family tragedy became more than just a sensational crime case. It became a complex narrative about love, obsession, family, and the sometimes fragile nature of the human psyche. Served as a reminder of the importance of vigilance, compassion, and community in nurturing healthy families and preventing future tragedy. The case continues to be studied, discussed, and remembered, its lessons reverberating through time. Tragic case that ultimately brought about positive change, ensuring that Helen Whitman's death was not in vain. Thank you for joining us for this chilling exploration of the Whitman family tragedy. We hope this case has not only captivated your interest, but also sparked important conversations about family dynamics, mental health, and the hidden dangers that can lurk beneath seemingly perfect facades. Your engagement with these complex and sometimes disturbing topics is crucial in raising awareness and potentially preventing similar tragedies in the future. We appreciate your time and attention to this sensitive subject matter. We invite you to reflect on the lessons learned from this case and consider how they might apply to your own life or community. Remember, vigilance, open communication, and support for one another are key in nurturing healthy relationships and family. Stay tuned for our upcoming videos where we'll continue to delve into more intriguing and thought-provoking true crime cases. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to ensure you don't miss any of our future content. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other. We'll see you in our next video.